Research methodology and methods. Methodology. The methodology I have chosen for my project is based in Kanien'kéha worldview that every life form has a voice. Within the epistemology of all Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse, the Ohondagaliwadekwa Thanksgiving address is used to acknowledge all life forms within the world and speaks of equality amongst all that is living. With the use of one's voice to speak comes the responsibility of creation to listen. The methodology used in Keadahu Sadatstio Nahodasu Vadigaladus. I listen to them, the different stories they tell. As they tell the stories from their memories, they will be heard. This demonstrates reciprocity, another example of the epistemology of the Haudenosaunee. Joanne Archibald, 2019, states that many Aboriginal people have said that to understand ourselves and our situation today, we must know where we come from and know what has influenced us. As people share their stories of the past, they are able to create new ways of dealing with what comes from it and move into the future. Similarly, autoethnography is an intriguing and promising qualitative method that offers a way of giving voice to personal experience for the purpose of extending sociological understanding. Autoethnography originates with a story about self, and in this research, I begin with my story of becoming a silent speaker and what I have done to reclaim my language of Kanien'kéha. The experiences shared by myself and the participants will give an understanding as to the causes and effects of becoming silent speakers and will encourage the participants to create their own solutions to regenerate their own fluency in Kanien'kéha. The experiences presented by myself and the participants in the research will be guided by a selection of 7 wampum strings from the Gatnigu-Lagiswas, a Haudenosaunee condolence ceremony. The wampum strings are used to symbolically remove obstructions of grief from the mind, heart, and body to instill hope and a clear outlook of the future. Wampum string. Introduction wampum. The first wampum is a symbolic expression of welcoming to those participating. First string of condolence. The vision. The string will acknowledge the tears which have been shed due to the pain of the memories from our language loss. Second string of condolence, the hearing. The string will acknowledge the hearing and how we have become affected by our language loss and no longer understand what we hear and what we have heard in the past. Third string of condolence, the voice. This string acknowledges the obstruction the pain has caused in our throats and how we have become silent and unable to speak. Fourth string of condolence, dark clouds. This string acknowledges the fear and guilt caused by not speaking the language. Fifth string of condolence, the string of darkness. This string acknowledges the sadness and depression of no longer speaking and our loss of identity. Sixth string of condolence, the sacred fire. This string acknowledges the healing which must take place to move forward and regenerate speakers of Kanien'kéha. Methods. An invitation was sent to Wolf Clan members to participate in the research project. Through a qualitative data collection approach, interviews were to be conducted with 9 participants from the 3 Wolf Clan families of the Kanien'kéha community of Akwesasne, who self-identify as silent speakers of Kanien'kéha. This strategy was intended to allow participants to express their narratives and feelings using their own voices, according to their own beliefs and opinions. It was also intended to ensure that the research was conducted with members of Akwesasne to assist the community with silent speakers of Kanien'kéha using storywork. Joanne Archibald, 2019, explains that storywork is about cultural understandings, how stories speak from deeper understandings of humans and their relations, and can speak from places of trauma and injustice. She speaks to decolonizing research and the importance of how it is time for us to go deeper into our own knowledge systems, deeper into our own story worlds. A meeting was then held with the Salahoane Council to gain support for the research project to move forward using the Gatnigu condolence ceremony as a guide. Data was collected from participants to identify contributing factors of silent speakers, people who understand the language quite well but do not speak it, within the 3 Wolf Clan families of the Kanien'kéha who are from the community of Akwesasne. Interviews were conducted with 9 participants between December 2019 and February 2020 to give voice to their experiences and feelings as to how they became silent speakers. They were also asked to identify contributing factors to their silence and what would be of assistance in helping them to become speakers of Kanien'kéha again. Setting and participants. The study took place in the homes of the participants within the Kanien'kéha community of Akwesasne, who are a majority of the remaining fluent speakers of Kanien'kéha are in their 40s and older. The most fluent speakers of indigenous heritage languages are typically the elders, the oldest living generations. It is not yet known how many silent speakers exist within the community of Akwesasne, but further studies in the future would be useful in identifying the number. Prior to starting the study, participants were informed about the research work to be conducted at a community Wolf Clan meeting and through email. They were invited to participate if they met the criteria, which was that they be of the Kanien'kéha people, live in Akwesasne, be a silent speaker, one who understands the language but does not speak, and be a Wolf Clan person from one of the 3 families. Procedures. Participants who accepted the invitation and wanted to take part in the study were given participant consent forms, which detailed the purpose, objectives, and importance of the research. Informed consent was also explained, meaning participants were well informed about the study, the potential risks and benefits of their participation, and that their participation was part of research and not therapy. Participation was voluntary, and it was their right to withdraw from the study at any time. The subject's physical, emotional, and psychological capability was taken into consideration when consenting. The informed consent process ensured the subjects understood their involvement in the study. Data collection. A participant interview guide was used to focus on obtaining participant experiences, feelings, and attitudes toward being silent speakers during face-to-face interviews. A total of 5 interview questions were posed to the participants. 1. What are some of your earliest recollections of speaking Kanien'kéha amongst your family? 2. What factors have contributed to making you a silent speaker? 3. What kinds of feelings have emerged from the contributing factors? 4. How has being a silent speaker impacted you and your life in general? 5. What do you feel would help you break down the barriers of silence and to become a speaker again? Each interview is recorded using a recording device. Once all of the interviews were recorded, transcription was completed to create written accounts of the spoken words. Each transcript was reviewed, coded to identify important concepts which answered the interview questions, and placed into themes guided by the wampum strings. Findings: Uplifting of the Mind's Condolence Ceremony. As a young child and moving through my life into becoming a grandmother, I have held the traditions and ways of being of the Haudenosaunee with respect and reverence. The teachings of the elders within my family, the ceremonial and political leaders of not only my own community and nation, but those of the sister communities and brother nations have wrapped me in a blanket of belonging and safety. The teachings and ways of being that I have been fortunate enough to receive have guided me through difficult times during my life. I have often wondered where I would be had they not been given. The sacred bundle of knowledge and language given by the ancestors and passed on to the future generations continues to be handed to the future generations. It is from this place that I do my research, guided by the knowledge and the words passed on to me over time. It is with the utmost respect that I have used the uplifting of the mind's condolence ceremony to uplift the minds of not only myself, my family, and my extended Wolf Clan families, but to all of the silent speakers who have been silenced and have endured the pain of the traumas afflicted upon them. I have been mindful and respectful as I have approached the Salahoana Wolf Clan Council and have asked for permission and support for this research project. They have come to realize the importance of the research work and have agreed to my request. As a young child being raised in a family of traditional Haudenosaunee teachings, it was not uncommon to hear the stories associated with the peacemaker and how he brought his message of peace to warring nations of people. They had accepted the message of peace and agreed to stop warring with one another and to find alternative ways of dealing with their grievances. All of the war leaders now became leaders of peace. With all of the warring, many lives had been lost in vengeance, so there was a lot of grief affecting the communities. It was through this that the condolence ceremony came about. It was also not uncommon to attend the condolence ceremony, which is done previously to the raising of a new leader within a nation of the Haudenosaunee. In its entirety and original form, the condolence ceremony consists of what is called the 15 strings of sympathy. In more modern times, the strings have been modified and used in dealing with other losses other than death, as it is proven to be helpful amongst the people. It was common to see my father receive phone calls and leave our home to tend to the responsibility of being the upright mind, when someone from the opposite side of the fire within the longhouse suffered a loss. Those who suffered the loss are known as their minds have fallen to the ground. It was during times such as this that the 3 wampum strings addressing the eyes, ears, and throat were used to assist the families with feelings of grief associated with loss. Traditionally, the words are used at a feast to uplift the minds of the people who have suffered a loss and offer comfort and healing so they can move forward in their lives. My father was a big thinker. Many times I would come upon him sitting at the kitchen table deep in thought. It was during one of these times that he formulated the idea of indigenous people of the world coming together to console one another for all of the grief and traumas that had been inflicted upon them by the oppressors. He would often talk about how our people were stuck and didn't seem to be able to move forward because of grief. It was during that time that he had a dream of a condolence ceremony to be attended by indigenous leaders from North and South America to address the grief of colonization and genocide. The traditional gathering of condolence, strength, and peace was held at the headwaters of the Mississippi River on June 18th to the 23rd, 2012, so indigenous people of the Americas could begin to move forward in peace. The words which were embedded into the wampum strings and were used at the headwaters of the Mississippi River for the people of the four directions are the same words used in guiding the findings of this research project of silent speakers. 7 strings have been taken from the original 15 strings of sympathy to demonstrate an understanding of how silent speakers have been affected by grief and trauma, and how using traditional therapeutic methods can assist in creating resilience and clearing the trauma from the heart, mind, and body. Welcoming the participants. The participants were in their 40s to 60s, 7 of which were female and 2 were male. All participants were parents, with 6 of them also being grandparents. All 9 participants live in the Kanien'kéha community of Akwesasne, are silent speakers, and are from one of the 3 wolf clan families within the Kanien'kéha: the Salahoina Majestic Tree family, the Kahentéhtha Life Sustainers family, and the Ololekgoa Great White Eagle family. All 9 participants have asked to remain anonymous and have been identified as P1 to P9. When asked about early recollections of being immersed in Kanien'kéha within their homes at an early age, participants stated Kanien'kéha was spoken amongst family members as well as community members. Some had recollections of speaking the language themselves, whereas others did not self-identify as being speakers. 4 participants recalled speaking Kanien'kéha as small children, as illustrated by their comments. They drew upon their memories and shared how old they were as speakers, which brought them to the age associated with starting school. I truly believe, maybe, and probably demonstrated some uncertainty, but they believed they did speak it at one time. I don't even know what age I was, but whenever going to do the old house, everybody spoke Mohawk, seemed like anyways. My father and mother spoke to each other in the language. I used to go to her mother and father's little house. They always conversed in their language to each other. My oldest siblings were fluent. Myself, early on, I just watched the guys have a good time and I listened to what they were saying. I could understand what they were saying. Not everything, but most of it. Yeah, I grew up a lot with the old farmers that used to farm. So I got the tail end of the guys that used to farm, and also the guys that used to hitch up horses, buggies, and sleighs in the wintertime. Summertime was buggies for the parades, so I was always around the language. P1. When I was young, I truly believe I used to speak Kanien'kéha. When visitors would come over and my mother and father would talk with the visitors, it was always in Kanien'kéha. P2. My first years were speaking Mohawk. I did at home with my siblings. It was the main language of our home then. P3. My parents always spoke. they spoke in Mohawk, but it was mostly from grandparents. Always spoke growing up. Yeah, we always heard it. P4, maybe grade 1. Yeah, maybe grade 1. P5, my earliest recollections, I never really spoke with my family members, but I remember hearing basic commands from my parents, like going back to maybe 6 or 7 years old. I never really had conversations with my parents or with my siblings in the language, but they told us what to do in the language and stuff like that. Grandparents, same thing. They actually all spoke to us in the language too. Not 100% of the time. P6. Probably in my childhood, my grandparents were fluent in the Mohawk language. My dad was very fluent. He spoke broken English because he was so fluent in his language. My older siblings, they're fluent now and they probably conversed with them. P7. Welcoming string of wampum. We understand it may have been difficult for you to travel. As you traveled, we imagined you encountered dusty trails and caused you discomfort. We therefore symbolically use the eagle feather to take the dust off your body, from the top of your head to your feet. During your travels, you may have encountered areas where thorny bushes grow. You may have accumulated burrs and pickers on your clothing to cause you discomfort. We remove these things from your clothing so that you will now be in comfort. Symbolically, we offer to you the purest and coolest water for you to drink. This will wash away any obstructions in your throat and stomach. We do this so that your voice will be strong and your hearing will be good. We give thanks that the Great Spirit allowed our brothers and sisters to arrive safely. These are the words as embodied in this first wampum string. Tears in the eyes. When identifying contributing factors of being silent speakers, participants spoke of attending school for the first time and the fear and punishment associated with speaking Kanien'kéha. Staying silent caused the erosion of language speaking abilities. 5 participants mentioned that in school, the use of Kanien'kéha was discouraged, whereas the use of the English language was encouraged, resulting in English gradually becoming the first language spoken in the home. I was going to school in Salmon, and my mother and father got a letter from the school saying not to encourage me to speak Mohawk, but they encouraged me to speak more English. P1. The biggest part of it was going to school. P2. My first years were speaking Mohawk, but when I went to school at St. Regis Mohawk School, I remember it wasn't very nice. When I would speak Mohawk with my friends that were from Spaghetti Corner way, we were punished. We were punished not to speak. About 2nd grade and once listening to and learning English, that's when I started speaking. P3. English was more popular. It was easier. It was in our school and you weren't made fun of. But I remember my cousins saying they got beat up for using it, and they were 2 or 3 grades ahead of me, So that was still at our school. I was behind them, P5. The influences of school, being in school and just English, becoming our first language more than anything. P7. Language suppression, particularly for Indigenous people, is a form of disempowerment and oppression that impacts self-identity, well-being, self-esteem, and empowerment, all of which are key ingredients for individual and community healing. 3 participants spoke of looks they received from grandparents or elders when there was an expectation they understand or respond in Kanien'kéha. They conversed to me. They conversed in the language thinking that I should understand. I should be able to articulate back to them in the language what they would ask of me, the look that I got from the boy. P1. A lot of the time we would always get that look when we didn't answer them or we didn't understand what they were trying to tell us to do. P6. They know that a lot of people are learning, so they just sit there and stare at you and wait for you to answer. P9. Aboriginal families have been at the center of a historical struggle between colonial governments on one hand, which set out deliberately to eradicate the culture, language, and worldview of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children over whom they had assumed control, and Aboriginal parents, on the other hand, who believe wholeheartedly that they have a sacred responsibility to maintain balance in the world for their children and others not yet born. The first string of condolence, the vision. We, the people of the North and the East, would like to bring to your attention the loss of vision you have incurred from our past history. The pain and suffering you have been carrying for generations have caused tears to envelope your vision. When you look into the future, you can only see blurry, shadowy, unrecognizable figures. This has been caused by the heavy burden of grief we carry. Our brothers and sisters of the South and West, listen to our words of condolence. We, the people of the North and the East, uplift our arms toward the universal power in our request that the softest and gentle cloth be provided by the Creator. We, the people, will now take the sacred cloth to wipe away the tears that you have shed for the past 500 years. We now beckon our great Creator above the heavens to lead you by the hand and place you at tomorrow's new sunrise. You will stand there with no more tears, and your vision for the future will be restored. You will now look out into the world with a renewed vision. You will see the brightness of the sun's light, revealing all of nature for you to enjoy. You will again see the animals, birds, clouds, sun, moon, stars, and you can see the gentle breezes as they move through the leaves on the trees. Now you will see the children of the future coming toward you, beckoning for the chance to live your teachings. We now deliver this sacred string of wampum containing our words. We will now await your favorable response, our brothers and sisters. Dust of grief in the ears. 3 participants spoke of hearing the language in anger and during arguments between family members and themselves, which resulted in not wanting to hear the turmoil, and as a result blocked it out. My mother and father spoke to each other in the language, but when they came to me, they didn't speak in Kahentéhtha, only unless they were mad or pissed off or swearing at the other one. P1. They told us what to do in the language and stuff like that, but we didn't talk like we understood what they wanted us to do. And if they were mad, they used the language, but we didn't really converse. P6. Yeah, a lot of arguing. Well, him arguing with her, and I think that probably could have been my block it off so I don't hear it or something. P4. One participant shared a memory of how their older siblings were affluent, and a bus driver, upon bringing the children home from school, scolded their mother not to speak Kanien'kéha to her children and to teach them English. The prompting to speak English through punishment and verbal abuse created more fear in the participant. It happened later when I was a teenager. My mother said she can remember a bus driver coming right to her house and scolding her because my older brothers would only speak Kanien'kéha. And the bus driver came in and said, "Why do you want your children to be savages?" He told her she had to teach them to speak English. When you go away to school, when you leave the house to go to school, and you're taught English and you're scolded for not speaking English, I think it has a lot to do with it. Even as I was in high school, I remember my gym teacher was yelling at me because I told one of the girls, "Anyoksa," and she pulled me aside and said, "We don't use that bad language here." P2. Another participant recalled the fear of speaking Kanien'kéha because of what had been told to her. I did at home spoke Kanien'kéha with my siblings, but it was the main language of our home then. But when the other kids came along, I think my mother wanted us to learn more English because of what happened to the older ones. Some of my brothers were punished, but they never really talked about it. P3. 3 participants spoke of being sent away or not being allowed in the home of the grandparents when adults were gathered, which they felt impacted them as they were unable to hear Kanien'kéha being used in conversation. My mother and father would talk to the visitors, and it was always in Mohawk, in Kanien'kéha. A lot of the time, the kids were sent away, like upstairs to go play out someplace else, so we didn't hear what they were talking about. P2. Like what they didn't want us to know they spoke in Mohawk. We were always told to go outside and play. P4. We weren't allowed to go into Duda's house, so we didn't hear all the gossip. P5. 2 participants also looked at being impacted in their lives by their parents and elders in their families who began to mix Kanien'kéha with English during conversations and beginning to speak English to converse with their children, knowing they could fully understand Kanien'kéha. I think it was starting to break up with our aunts too. I remember it breaking it up, and it was easier to say the English word than to say their long Mohawk words, I think. English and Mohawk. P5. My dad was very fluent. He had very broken English because he was so fluent in his language. I think the influences of school, being in school and just English becoming our first language more than anything. So my dad seemed like he was trying more to speak English over Mohawk too, to try and communicate with us even though we understood the Mohawk language. P6. Whether heard directly through a memory or not heard at all, it has had an effect upon children growing up in Kanien'kéha speaking families. Many elders began to use English more often to support the education of their children and to avoid having them be punished and ridiculed. Leanne Hinton explains it well when stating that people can have often given up language along with other aspects of their heritage, culture, and way of life for the sake of their own welfare and that of their children. Upon hearing more use of the English language within the home domain made it more possible for the children to follow suit and use Kanien'kéha less. The second string of condolence, the hearing. We would like to bring to your attention a very serious matter. First, when we experience grief from all our mounting losses, our hearing becomes affected. This is what happened to you and I. Because your hearing has been affected, it is hard for you to hear the words as they come from your loved ones. When someone speaks to you, you cannot hear the words clearly. You are distant and cannot respond properly. This has been caused by the pain and suffering we have inherited from the experience of our ancestors. Listen to our words of condolence so that you, our brothers and sisters, may receive our gift. With extended arms and faces toward the sky, we ask a request from the Creator that a soft plume of the feather is provided. With the softness of this feather, we come to you to cleanse away the dust of grief that has accumulated in your ears. Again, we, your brothers and sisters, extend our arms toward the Creator and request that you will be placed in the new sunrise of tomorrow. This new sunrise will represent the dawning of a new day that has restored your hearing. With restored hearing, you will go out into the world to enjoy the sounds of nature. You will hear once again the rippling sounds coming from the waterways. You will recognize once again the different sounds of music coming from your bird relatives. You will hear the changing of the winds. You will be able to hear the drumming in the distance as your neighbors perform their Thanksgiving ceremony. With the restoration of a hearing, you can now enjoy hearing your children's laughter. With restored hearing, you can now hear the coming faces coming towards you. Obstructions in the throat. Many of the feelings associated with becoming silent speakers surfaced as obstructions in the throat. The obstructions were related to the silence, and each feeling and obstruction were needed to be dealt with in order to begin speaking Kanien'kéha again. Juso explains how there are people who have been more or less forbidden to speak their language. Some who spoke or heard the language as children but have not spoken as adults, and someone may expect would know more, but lack vocabulary. With the punishment and fear of speaking Kanien'kéha as they became older, 3 participants began to use more English and silence their use of the language. We were punished not to speak, so each day that I went back to school, it was the same thing. We couldn't speak those words. So because of that, I stayed quiet and I would barely talk. P3. When I get hurt, I don't say no more. I just block. I block things out and I become silent. I just block. I don't carry it either though. Like I'll carry it for a while and then forget about it. It's not important. That's probably why there's a lot of missing, because I blocked it out. P5. I remember conversing with my grandmother and trying to say something to her in Mohawk, and she couldn't understand what I was trying to say and interpreted it a whole different way. I would just stop talking altogether. P7. Juso also states that when one feels foolish, they reject any responsibility to learn the language. 2 participants express wanting to be able to communicate with speakers of Kanien'kéha, but how awkward it was for them when they did. Whenever I spoke to my family members, my grandparents, the relationship was built on English. So when I really spoke in the language, it became awkward. P6. And then you're just sitting there with a speaker, and they're trying to remember what to say, and it's just awkward. P9. In speaking less Kanien'kéha, 7 of the participants expressed a feeling of fear of making mistakes when speaking their own language, which also contributed to not speaking anymore. When I was older, I didn't totally understand what they said, and when I answered, it was wrong, and they laughed. I was embarrassed, and I didn't speak anymore. P4. I felt shameful that I didn't know. I kind of looked at my mother, and my mother put my head down. From that point on, I didn't know what to say. Sometimes I started to converse in Mohawk, end up saying it wrong and being corrected. P1. I think that afraid to make a mistake, if I did speak in 2 languages, the fear of being punished again or feeling bad for my friends. I was afraid that I would be laughed at. P3. Oh, I couldn't speak. I don't know why I couldn't speak. Afraid of mistakes, afraid of being wrong, hollered at, not saying it right. That's how it was growing up, too. I remember our cousins trying to speak, and my older siblings would say, "That's not how you say it. You're still baby talking." You know, it's throwing those mean words at somebody. I just didn't speak. I didn't want those words thrown at me. P5. It's a hard thing because at the bottom of your heart you want to speak your language, but at the same time you have this fear that's built in, but not quite sure exactly what I was afraid of, besides making a mistake. But that's just how it was, I guess. P6. I had difficulties as a child pronouncing some Are language, and I might have got misinterpreted, or I don't know. I think I would stumble on my words, maybe stutter on some of my pronunciations, and then it just made me feel insecure about speaking my language. I was afraid if I made a mistake, or you don't want to get hollered at or made fun of for speaking it the wrong language, or not stressing or not pronouncing it right. P7. Fear of saying words wrong. Then my memory. I could never remember what I wanted to say. P9. Jusou goes on to ask, who actually knows anything perfectly? She also adds that in order to become proficient, you have to start from where you are. 3 participants express feeling shame at no longer being able to speak Kanien'kéha. Although frequently interconnected, guilt is the negative evaluation of a specific behavior. I've done an awful thing, whereas shame condemns the self. I am an awful person. During the study, guilt and shame along with fear were the most prominent feelings identified by the participants. Their difference is further highlighted in what each emotion motivates. Guilt may prompt reparative efforts, whereas shame may trigger avoidance and withdrawal. The first response, it was shame. I felt shameful that I didn't know we're talking about emotions and we got to be able to identify what we're feeling. Shame is one of the deepest emotions. I wanted to say no because I know that I didn't have the ability to speak fluently and I felt ashamed. P1. Not understanding. There was a lot of shame with that. P4. Shame. Shame was one of them, especially. That would be some of their responses, especially with the grandparents. P6. 7 participants also expressed feelings of inadequacy at not speaking the language when there was an expectation to do so. They express expectations from grandparents and elders more so than their parents. One participant spoke of expectations which were tied to cultural knowledge and being in a leadership role within the longhouse. There's a lot of expectation as a young person growing up and expecting to know these languages, especially if you belong to a lot of societies. You should know how to do the opening, you should be learning the songs, and you should start to be able to understand what everyone's talking about in their speeches. It's always been a setback for all of us, even myself, to be able to perform certain things and having the confidence. I don't know if my brain got kind of like concrete, not allowing me to absorb too much more. I've tried to learn songs and I just can't pick it up. And what's that word? To memorize? Same way with the language. I am learning, but it feels like I'm still on the short version. And when I practice, I practice. When it comes to that moment, I have to really think about it and really put myself in a different mindset because my conversation, the language I speak is English. Kanien'kéha is my second language and I can't even be fluent in that. I've been doing that, being around people all my life, and still struggle with that today. P1. One participant felt she had failed her grandchildren in not being able to speak, but also felt good that she had enrolled her children in Kanien'kéha immersion to learn the language. Makes me feel like it can, even though I feel like I failed my own self. I can say that I helped somebody else in getting that language because I put my children there. My granddaughters now are at Akwesasne Freedom School and they're learning, but I feel like I'm holding them back sometimes because they have the language. Then they come to my house and they speak for a little while, then it just goes back to English. For the language, it seems like I tried all my life to do that and I can't get it. Like I can hear people talking, I know what they're saying, I just don't know why I can't answer in Kanien'kéha. P2. One participant attributed her lack of speaking ability to not having the self-confidence to do so, while one participant compared her language ability to that of her own children, believing she knew nothing. I guess not having the self-confidence enough to speak it. P3. The children were correcting me, so then I thought, holy man, I really don't know nothing. P4. Another participant regretted not doing more to teach her children Kanien'kéha and felt guilty. I feel like I should have did more, and I just should have listened to my inner self and said, no, I want to speak my language. My children should have been more fluent than what they are. It starts with me and I didn't do enough. I have the younger one that really wants to learn the language and she reminds me and I feel indifferent or I feel like bad that I didn't incorporate the language more. Because I grew up with it, I was the one that understood it but never really spoke it. P7. One participant expressed anger at the expectation placed on her by her mother. She blamed her mother for not teaching her and questioned what she believed was an expectation to speak Kanien'kéha. I was supposed to know that was what was being said. Well, how do you, mother, expect me to know? How do you expect me to know when you never talk to me in these words? Then she would just wave her hand at me like, she doesn't know how to talk, like it was my fault. Because she was, making me look bad. P8. One participant was frustrated at her speaking ability and not being able to converse as she wanted, and at not being able to teach her children. You kind of feel like an outsider, like even though you're among your own people, you're just like sitting on the sidelines watching them speak, watching them converse. You can't do anything because you can't speak Kanien'kéha. You can't put your sentences together and you've got your little words and you could put your little words together, but everybody's speaking all advanced and everything like that. It's hard, especially having kids, because that's what you want for them. You want them to grow up to be first language speakers. P9. Language acquisition is not just about grammar and words, but also about thoughts and feelings. The thoughts control the feelings connected to language use. Negative thoughts make you even more reluctant to believe in your skills and make it even harder to start speaking out loud. We have all thought that, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, even though we could if we just tried. The third string of condolence, the voice. Listen to us, our brothers and sisters. Today your voice is limited, caused by the great losses you have incurred in the past 500 years. There is an obstruction of pain in your throat that prevents you from speaking clearly. The certainty behind your voice has been consumed by the painful memories your ancestors experienced. We come to you to offer support so that your voice will be restored. We, your brothers and sisters, uplift our arms and faces towards the sky where the Creator dwells. We request on your behalf that the Creator will look favorably upon you, to send the purest medicine water to drink. We now give you this healing water to drink. This water will cleanse your throat and remove all of the obstructions that resulted from your past pain and suffering. We now request from the Creator to bring you before the dawn of a new day. In the light of our oldest brother, the sun, your voice shall return. With a renewed voice, you will be able once again to speak with your relations of the natural world and your immediate families. Burden of grief and sorrow. One participant had feelings of grief as he recounted the loss of elders and their language and the knowledge they had taken with them. We had a tremendous loss of elders that were very sentimental in pushing forward and preserving our culture and way of life. And unfortunately, those who have struggled and maintained have left us. They took a lot of their knowledge. Some, the ones that shared, had left an impact and a legacy behind so they could preserve the language. P1. Feelings of hurt and sadness from the attitudes of others were expressed by two participants. One participant spoke of her grandfather who had attended residential school and took an attitude towards his granddaughter's pride in her own identity as an Aboriginal person. My grandfather, he used to live with us. He was raised in a residential school. I was trying to be so proud of being Kanien'kéha. He used to wear a lot of beaded bracelets, necklaces, moccasins, and he was a miserable man when he wasn't drinking. So I saw a lot of that, how miserable he was. And he would scold me sometimes and say, "Oh, I hate that Indian stuff." And that really hurt. P2. I was so sad that they weren't proud enough to know how beautiful our language is. I only knew how beautiful it was only because I went back to school. P5. The fourth string of condolence. Dark clouds. Listen to us, our brothers and sisters. We look upon you and we take notice of your apparent distant disposition. You appear to us as if you are covered with dark clouds from above and beyond. Your head hangs with your troubled thoughts. Your whole being is covered in loneliness, and with unease you trod from day to day, uncertain where to go. We understand the heavy burden of grief you carry. Therefore, listen to our words. We, your brothers and sisters, we implore the Creator to give us the strength to scatter the dark clouds away from your existence. We request from the Creator that the dawn of the new day will cause you to look about you, and at this time you will realize the blue sky has again come back into existence. Brothers and sisters, continue to listen to our words. Now that you have been freed from the clutches of the dark clouds, you can go into future days with a renewed spirit. You will be able to once again partake of normal activities in the world and in your community. Burden of trauma from anger and blame. 3 participants spoke of the use of alcohol being associated with Kanien'kéha being spoken amongst family members. Alcohol is associated with lowering inhibitions, which explains why silent speakers tend to speak their language more when under the influence of alcohol. My oldest siblings were fluent. Then the ones a little bit older in between us didn't speak the language, only when they were drinking. So I heard a lot more when people were drinking, maybe because it was confident for them. When they were drunk, they speak the language. P1. My mother and father would argue, and my parents were drinking. So I know there was a lot of harsh words said. P4. I stand up for myself and I look at them and I say, "What about your kids? Look at your kids, are they speakers?" The older guy said, Only when they're drunk they speak. P5. One participant spoke abuse and how she felt it was related to the blocking of not only Kanien'kéha but her childhood memories overall. I think it was affected by my abuse. I think that's what happened then, and I don't know where my language went, But I think that was a block somewhere that blocked a lot of my childhood. P5. 3 participants spoke of feelings associated with cultural incompetence within the longhouse and not being able to fulfill responsibilities in the ceremonial and political aspects and in teaching the young ones. I know being involved and the leadership, the expectation and the weight that it has on me from others in the family, all assuming I'm a fluent speaker and I understand everything. I say, no, I'm not. I'm still learning. Such a big role for a leader to know that part. An important role. Otherwise, you can't perform and conduct and facilitate ceremonies. So there are other feelings and emotions that go along with that, such as helplessness, hopelessness, and there's frustration for myself, sense of failure, sense of disappointment in myself. I try to do the best I can and try to focus on that much anyways, but being a leader is a tremendous stress and all the responsibility lies on me to be able to perform. I know one day I would like to go out and be able to speak fluently. P1. It didn't bother me until I had my son. When we were young, there weren't a lot of speakers. I don't remember a lot of speakers. Why did it matter at this time? Oh, it mattered. What was I going to give him? How was I going to show him who he was? So I tried harder, and I was 22 at the time. So I tried harder. I spoke as much as I could to my mother, and wholly it mattered. Our ways mattered, but I understood everything that was going on at the longhouse. Most of it I didn't, and I kept going. I was able to make out a lot of it, knowing it was all in the language and I didn't know it. P5. When I go to the ceremonies, I can fully understand most of what's being said and what's being conducted. But for me to translate to somebody, like my child, if she has questions, it's hard for me to interpret because I automatically understand it. So sometimes it's hard for me to put it in English to fully explain to the extent of it because our language is so complex that if you don't understand it fully, it's hard to interpret, I guess. Yeah, so I had a hard time explaining it. P7. 2 participants felt feelings of anger and blame towards their parents for not teaching them the language and traditional teachings. When I was younger, I used to blame my parents. Growing up in the church, I didn't get to have a name in the longhouse until I was in my early 20s. I had to repent that I did go to church. P1. No encouragement. There was no prompting or just no support or nothing. The only time they really spoke when we wanted to know. We would say, "Hey Ma, how do you say?" She would tell us, but we would be the ones asking. They sure didn't offer. They didn't make it a mandatory. She brushed it under the rug like it's her fault she doesn't know how to speak. And it was my mom's fault, and it would make me angry. P8. Wexler suggests that cultural resilience in indigenous communities is the result of an active production of culture that creates meaning and allows indigenous people to have a positive view of their identity. 3 participants raised in the teachings of the church spoke of the importance of taking the learning of Kanien'kéha back to nature and traditional teachings. It comes to creation because a lot of our ancestors are there. We talk about that fire. It begins with that spark. If there's a spark in us, there's motivation. There's determination in learning something new. With the language, it has to be something that can inspire us and motivate. It can be something that's so ancient and so hard, difficult to do. People just want to learn the language because it fills them up with something good and it makes you feel good inside. That warmth starts growing in your chest where that fire is. I think it's very important that we do speak our language, that we do speak it with compassion and love, and that we treat each other in that way as we're talking or communicating in that way, conversing with each other. When we do that, it changes our minds and the way we think. A lot of times today we're trying to figure out our identity and trying to figure out where our place is in today's society. I think maybe we need to get back to nature. All the answers are in the Ganusisne, and all the answers are in the Ahondagaliwadehwa. When we generally acknowledge those things, then we feel more connected to nature, more connected to Sungoya Dizo, and all the things he provided for us. P1. I knew who I was. I was strong, recognizing that we weren't supposed to be English people. We were supposed to be Ungwahue, natural people. I really took that to heart and I tried really hard to leave that Catholic part of me away. I wanted to go to be who I was supposed to be in the Longhouse. P2. They want them to bring more culture and learn more about it. Go to the Longhouse, learn what you can. I was embarrassed because I didn't know nothing about it. But then again, that's the way we grew up. It was almost like taboo. P4. The fifth string of condolence, the darkness. Our brothers and sisters, listen to the words we convey to you. We have an empathy with you in carrying the great burden of grief caused by the arrival of people from the other side of the ocean. For over 500 years, all of our people have been victimized through the use of genocidal practices. Both of our peoples have been disinherited of our homelands. We have experienced countless atrocities by misguided individuals. Every day we remember the rapes, the murder, the cheating, broken treaties, tactics of coercion, decimation through disease, and loss of land and language. Yes, our brothers and sisters, we indeed carry this heavy burden derived from our common experience and past. Every day, wherever we may be, we have images of terrible events in our lives and in our past. We react to our burden in different ways depending on the circumstance or where we are in that particular moment. We become addicted to alcohol and drugs because it offers a momentary escape from our reality. We become workaholics so that by constantly occupying our minds with something, we lessen the pain of our burden. We become travelers so that we can keep changing our scenarios. We join the oppressor's military because we want to be validated as a people. We take partners from another race to feel acceptance. When we become successful in the oppressor's way of life, we often lose our cultural values and identity. We have adopted foreign religious practices in the past to accommodate our survival. Some have forgotten our own religious practices designed by the Creator for the people of Turtle Island. Reigniting the Fire. 3 participants shared their opinions of the Kanien'kéha and English languages. I think English language is probably the worst language that we could speak in the world because it degrades spirit. P1. It just seems that it's easier, you get a better understanding of things when it's hurting the language. I think English is boring just to listen to, and Mohawk has more feeling, I guess. P3. That's when I knew how beautiful our language was. It didn't seem to have swear words or to cut people down, chop them up like English does. 2 male participants identified various gatherings as a way to educate people. They can be responsible for their own learning their language too. I know one day I would like to go out and be able to speak fluently. I think that maybe one way, I don't know if that's the answer, is to organize. Have to be very, very organized in the sense that someone can facilitate a talking circle to reach certain levels of expectations, setting some goals for ourselves. We can gather up certain people in the clan, and maybe the focus is just to direct all the attention to the language if that's something we want to pursue and find the answers. Workshops and talking circles to begin to talk about our struggles with the language and how talking with other individuals in the family and finding out what could work and what can't work. I think the most important thing to do is to just start out with the effects and impacts of colonization and what it has done to our ancestors and to our way of thinking. P1. To gather people like that and being able to expand on the vocabulary that we have, we know just working together to try to build on what's there. P6. The family theme addressed the importance of learning language within the family setting. Historically, languages were learned within the family, and all participants also experienced their first language from the family. My boys are kind of confused into what language they speak. I try to encourage them to speak Mohawk, but I know I'm using the English Kahentéhtha name, but I told them I would like to use more of the Uhuaneha Kasana natural names, but I get in the habit of using the English names. So I'm at fault too in a lot of ways because I let my family down. It's hard when you go to the longhouse and you're the only one there and you look for your family there. I know sometimes we feel the same way and we kind of look around to see who are left and who still continues these ways. I know I might have some of them, but there are others that in the family might have some parts of how to solve this problem. P1. There's still a lot of work to be done, and if you could teach our class, have our classrooms into homes, I think it could help to bring families in there, not just only kids. Our schools are still in the residential schools. They're not family oriented. It's behind desks, and our kids don't learn that way. P5. Get a lot of the material in the house to start with the families, the parents, and to help them learn there, and that could be from us to start. My sister, we were going to do a bulletin with the Ahonda Galiwadekwa on her wall so that she could practice that. It's somewhere to start, like colors and everything, like we know all of that. The letters, the syllables, cue cards, so that we're at least doing something with the language, but for an hour or 2 a day. Even if it's just a game for the little guys for now. P9. 6 participants expressed that it was more important to hear and speak through conversation rather than learning to read and write the language. They all expressed from their own learning experience that it did more for them to be immersed in conversations with elders, using different teaching methods and having the support of a fluent speaker or elder. I'm still looking for the magical formula so that I can pick it up in no time. I haven't found anything so far. I just have to speak it. P1. What is the method that would make us produce speakers like on the immersion programs? What's the ratio? The best ratio of speakers? I always thought if two parents, if they spoke the language together, their children are going to speak the language. Both my parents spoke the language together, but I don't speak it. So there's something there. But I always believed that 2 speakers to 1 child, not 1 teacher to 5 children. I think having the best ratio is 2 to 1, if you want a speaker. The biggest barrier for me now, and I don't think it's a barrier, if I was given the chance to go to an immersion program, P2. People should be more immersed with more speakers around you. More being immersed instead of the writing. Writing it down, you gotta really do it. Situational teaching would be really good, and to have somebody who's really going to help you. P3. I know I'm not able to hold a conversation with somebody. I might understand with what they're saying. I might get a gist of what they're saying, but not the whole dialogue. My son, he says we just learn to read and write where the younger ones can have a conversation. He wants his kids to be able to speak. P4. I find that you can get so much from that simple conversation. People do all this reading and writing that you're made to do in school. Yeah, it's great, but if you don't understand what you just wrote or what you just read, then you're not knowing the language. I've come to learn that the only way I'm going to become a speaker is to speak it fluently, to actually be conversing with people. I find that you get so much from that simple conversation. P7. I feel like I needed someone. Elder? To me, it's like one thing. Yeah, I go to school, and then you have to leave and it's class content, but it's not life. I think that you need support for your teacher, and you need support. P8. Participants express that emergent education has brought Kanien'kéha fluency to their children. Herms is cited in McIver, draws upon the work of a number of prominent researchers to assert that the indigenous immersion method is quickly being recognized as one of the most effective tools for restoring indigenous language. P5. Participants also expressed their own desire to enter immersion program to regenerate their own language speaking abilities, and long-term indigenous language revitalization advocates also support language immersion. 4 participants spoke of learning vocabulary, from the basics to conjugations of verbs and pronouns. I've realized that throughout my life and during my teaching years, I never really understood the conjugation of verbs. The verbs are what I wanted to learn, so I joined the group, and I did it for about maybe 6 to 8 weeks. I really enjoyed it. If it was about speaking, I got to learn how you change the words, the verbs, depending on how many people. There's like it was told to her about 16 different verbs. Not verbs, it's pronouns I'm talking about. Yeah, there's a lot, so that's what I really want to learn more about. It changes the other words once you change the pronouns. It changes the structure. P3. I need to work on that plural and groups and stuff. I still don't know how to conjugate the word to make it sound right. Singular, like you, me, he, she, that I can grasp and I can conjugate words. But when it gets to two people, two males, two females, and group settings, you lose me. P7. A word would get thrown in there that I didn't know. Like right now, I'm trying to remember a word. You know there are pieces of it. I remember. I do get hung up here and there. Sometimes I just don't know how. Like I have a word, I just don't know how to use it, like the context. Or if I hear a conversation and I can figure out what they're saying, but I can't get the context of it. P8. Two participants spoke of confidence, which is needed for people to begin speaking Kanien'kéha again. We work on each other's self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence. Then we can work with one another and help one another. P1. Working together to try and build on what's there and build that confidence in everyone to start reaching out even further and fine-tuning the language they speak. P6. 3 participants stated that grouping people at their speaking levels was important to regenerate speakers of Kanien'kéha. One mentioned feeling more comfortable when speaking with children. I would probably be more comfortable with kids than adults because that's probably where my level is at, like to theirs. P4. Be hooked up with other people in the same situation, maybe even at the same level, finding a way. P6. Speak all levels, all levels, because you really do gotta hear it without the broken English. P8. In today's modern times, people are connected socially using phones and internet. Some participants believed it could be useful in teaching language. 2 participants mentioned the use of technology and how it would be helpful as a teaching tool with learning apps and on courses. Today there's a lot of distraction, but I know technology is very interesting because a lot of people say, well, it's bad, but if we can use that for our advantage to learn, I think that can be a positive thing, using technology. Our thoughts is on the phone now. It's become a habit, a way of life. Either set the phone down or use it as a tool to advance yourself. I know the world has become a lot smaller, and consciously the phone is a very interesting tool we can use to advance our language, possibly. P1. We always have the technology for the phones, like the apps, the courses. P9. In discussing the impacts of not being able to speak Kanien'kéha, 4 participants recounted how even though they no longer spoke Kanien'kéha fluently, they felt they had a positive impact on their children and community by helping to move the language into the future. I'm proud that 2 of my children are speakers and teachers of the language. That makes me feel like, even though I feel like I failed my own self, I can say that I helped somebody else in getting that language because I put my children there in Kanien'kéha immersion. That was one of the main. It's so important to me to have the language. If I don't have it, at least I know the future generations will have it. P2. I have more confidence to speak to the elders especially. So I'm really happy about that. More confidence and not being afraid to speak and teaching the younger ones. Accomplishment, I guess, to be helpful to other people. I feel I'm giving back to community by speaking and helping them to give them confidence too, because I know a lot of them won't try. They have to realize that no one is going to laugh at them, but they're going to help you. I try to do that all the time. P3. When I had kids, I wanted them to know the language. That's why I kind of pushed them to learn. Like the older 3 went to immersion. They talk, and I think that's where I'm fine with. But I wish I could talk more. As long as they're learning it and passing it on. P4. It's hard, especially having kids, because that's what you want for them. You want them to grow up to be first language speakers. But they learn it in school, and they learn what we teach them from here. It's all a learning experience to not take it that hard. P9. The 6th string of condolence. The sacred fire. Our brothers and sisters, listen to our words that are directed to you. We can see them, how cold and comfortable you are as you traverse on earth. The fire that kept you warm in the past years have gone out. The wood from your fireplace has scattered and no longer produces heat. You have suffered many great losses, and that is the primary reason your fire has gone out. The Great Spirit gives your life, and with that life you were given a fire to keep your body warm. The Great Spirit also gives you a family fire so that the circle would be strong. Now this is what we will do for you. We have brought with us bundles of wood, and we will rekindle a fire for you and your families. This fire will grow strong and keep all of your families warm. The smoke from your fire will rise to the heavens and will be noticed by all of your relations and neighbors. Your friends and neighbors will say to themselves, "We are happy that our neighbor's fire burns again. Live again with no obstacles." Now we, your brothers and sisters, say to you, you must make preparations to honor your responsibilities once again. Our brothers and sisters, we have conveyed these messages of condolences to help rekindle your fire. Your fire, you will now take your positions of responsibility and steer it toward the future. We thank Creator for allowing us to come together in this way. We have spoken and await your favorable response.